75% of all GDP has been produced for free from nature, no longer. Everything from crops to fish farms are collapsing. We had 50,000 tons of fish just die in Vietnam. Approximately the same amount of salmon went belly up earlier this year in Chile. We're nearing the place where we won't have enough food to put on the shelves, and that's the bottom line. So with no biosphere production, there can be no economic production, there can be no civilization as we know it, and that's the road we're on.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. Given the tumultuous nature of the world of economy and Bitcoin and cryptos and so many emotions running high, it's funny that I would turn my attention to geoengineering, and somehow for me it's an emotional respite. Guys, I have Dane Wigington back on the line. He's the founder of geoengineeringwatch.org, a longtime friend of SGT Report, and a hardcore truth teller. Dane, welcome back.
Glad to be back, Sean. Thanks for your continued efforts to sound the alarm for the bigger picture.
Yeah, I got to tell you something funny here. So you know how Google is changing their algorithms to filter out truth news, and they just want the official stories and the official narratives on just about every subject you can imagine to come up in the returns. I was typing in Geoengineering Watch into my browser, and now Google is guessing what you're going to type, and it completed my sentence without me wanting it to say geoengineeringwatch.org debunked. I kid you not. So anyway, I hit return, and there are 2 Geoengineering Watch articles at the very top, but the third one is debunked from Metabunk. Isn't it funny how the war is on when it comes to information?
Well, ask yourself how that can happen when our traffic is exponentially higher than any of the disinformation sites, yet somehow they end up near the top of the ladder on the search engines. That's no accident. So this is just simply their way of fighting back and pushing back against the traction that we are definitely gaining.
You know, it was back in November, I think, of 2016 that Sundar Pichai, the Google CEO, famously said, "We are changing our algorithms, and there is no place for fake news at Google."
When you search on Google for news that isn't true comes just as high up the search results as news that is true.
This is very important to us. You know, at Google, we've always cared about bringing the most relevant and accurate results to users, and that's where almost all our work goes. And at the end of the day, you know, when I look at it, it's important to remember we get billions of queries every day. There have been a couple of instances where it's been pointed out, and we clearly did not get it right, and so it's a learning moment for us, and we will definitely work to fix it. Just in the last 2 days, we announced that we will remove advertising from anything we identify as fake news.
And again, I know it's getting tired to ask this question, and everybody knows, at least anybody who's awake knows what's up, but who's the arbiter of truth? Who are we going to trust? Metabunk? Snopes? I mean, honestly, are these people, do they really think the entire population is brain dead and Google is just one monolithic monopoly that will be allowed to just dictate information for the rest of time?
Well, we have a population that is unfortunately all too comfortable keeping their heads rammed in the sand at the moment, Sean. So I hope that they wake up soon, because truly, mathematically speaking, we do not have much time on the current course, and that's a statistical fact. And we can go over those facts as you choose to. But if the population does not wake up and help us to turn course completely and immediately, we'll hit the wall at full velocity very soon.
Okay, let's just start with the basics for people who are tuning in. For anyone to whom this information is new, I would direct you guys to go to the Facebook Geoengineering Watch page and take a look at the pictures, take a look at the videos, take a look at what they're doing to our skies, and ask, what are they doing to our skies? And why? Dane, what's the latest information on what they're up to, and what's the official story on what they're up to in terms of geoengineering?
For geoengineering, for those that are unaware of it, these programs have been fully deployed since 1945. We have the government documents to actually back that up. We have statistical data to back that up. And their decision to do so, to engineer Earth's climate without the knowledge or consent of populations, meant that since that time, all of us, anyone alive on the planet, has been a subject in this grand and lethal test, again, without our knowledge or consent. So it involves completely disrupting Earth's natural climate cycle, saturating the atmosphere with light scattering, electrically conductive particles. These are heavy metal particles in many cases. Our lab tests prove this, so we're not speculating or theorizing. And these particles, Sean, are manipulated with massively powerful RF radio frequency microwave transmissions. So when they move the particles around with these transmissions, they can move air masses around. They can create high and low pressure zones. They can augment or deter precipitation. They can make it rain or shut it off, in other words. They can create, and this is a major part of climate engineering that people need to understand. Even people in the anti-geoengineering community do not yet understand and acknowledge the massive engineered cool downs. This is important that people understand this, that are being carried out by jet stream manipulation and a patented process called chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. What does that mean? It means they can spray chemical ice nucleating agents into clouds and precipitation and chemically nucleate that into snow from what should have been rain. What does that do? Creates a cold, dense layer of air that settles down to the ground, drops temperatures, can create snow where it should have been rain. Sean, you've seen headlines, I'm sure, in the recent past where it snows over the pyramids, it snows in the middle of the Arabian desert and so forth, correct?
Yes, correct.
And that is part of the psychological operation of climate engineering. When you can create a headline like that, even if it's snowing at 50 degrees, and in many cases it is, we have actually recorded such incidences, it still creates the impression for many people that how could there be a problem with the climate if it's snowing in the pyramids where it's never snowed in recorded history. And so in addition to weather warfare, in addition to trying to mask the severity of damage already done to the climate while doing yet more damage in the process, they're able to create this confusion and division in the population as to the true state of the climate while they're at the same time making it worse. So that's the chemical ice nucleation process is an aspect of climate engineering that must be acknowledged by the anti-climate engineering community. So if I could leave off with this, or these two mantras, Sean, I'll give this back to you then. We should consider that there can be no legitimate discussion about the climate without first and foremost including the subject of climate engineering. And then secondly, we should consider and remember that there can be no legitimate discussion about climate engineering without including the chemical ice nucleation for weather modification, the engineered cool downs that are created with this process. So both aspects must be remembered and considered.
Yeah, but here's the problem. I believe, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong here, I think there's psychological warfare going on in terms of geoengineering, which is to say that we continue to hear it maligned, the idea of quote-unquote chemtrails, which I know is not a term you care for, and it's not scientifically accurate, I suppose, but we hear any discussion about geoengineering and climate manipulation via aerosols maligned by the mainstream media. Meanwhile, I just went to Harvard's website, and guys, you can type this in for yourself, geoengineering.environment.harvard.edu, Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program, and it talks about their overarching goals. Let me just read a little bit of this to you, Dane. Track 1, Advancing Science and Technology. Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program will develop methods that might reduce the risks and improve the efficacy of solar geoengineering when compared to the injection of sulfates into the stratosphere, which has been the standard proposal since the 1970s. Specific examples include, number 1, develop novel solid aerosols that might reduce or even reverse ozone loss by neutralizing stratospheric chlorine, have optical properties that greatly reduce stratospheric heating compared to sulfate aerosol. And it goes on. You guys can read this document for yourself. Geoengineering is not only very real, Harvard has an entire section of their website dedicated to it.
They're dedicated to it, but here's where we have the betrayal of populations around the globe by academia. And academia pretending that these programs are not going on when they've been going on for 70 plus years already. And all the things that they claim to be trying to figure out how to mitigate, like the ozone loss that would occur if they geoengineered, has long since been going on. That's why we've had massive ozone holes, not just over the polar regions now, but the entire ozone layer is thinning. We have a former NASA engineer working directly for us, 40-year NASA veteran aeronautics engineer. He has expensive UV equipment that we supplied to him, and he is in an absolute panic, Sean, because at the current rate of ozone loss, we have perhaps as little as 8 years left until total ozone layer collapse. If that happens, and that's exactly where we're headed, game over for all terrestrial life on planet Earth and most aquatic life. Sean, can you feel when you get a direct shot of sun how hot it feels in your skin?
Well, yeah, but I will say this. We've had a cooler summer, and I think it's because of what you've described. I know the West is suffering under tremendous heat. I'm in the Midwest, and it's been relatively cool and pleasant.
You know, that's a factor that's absolutely going on right now. In fact, if people want to look at the maps that show clearly just how anomalous this cool down zone is, it's one of the second or third most recent posts at geoengineeringwatch.org, frying the West to cool the East. And you can see a big blue patch over the eastern U.S. and the whole world that's red. And so when you cool down areas, back to the psychological operation or aspect of this, when you keep cool certain regions that are the most populated regions in the country, you can keep confused and divided most of the population as to the true state of the climate. So let me give you some actual statistics on the UV so we know we're not guessing. We get UVA and UVB. That's the only official data that's reported on. There's no measuring done, nothing reported on UVC, for example, which is the next lower and much more lethal band of UV radiation. That's the band of UV radiation directly above X-ray. We all know how detrimental that is. So we're told that UVC, I just published an article on this as well with a statement from our NASA engineer that your listeners can find at geoengineeringwatch.org at the top of the recent and top story section. So our NASA engineer has metered UVC now at extremely significant levels, DNA damaging levels, and we're told by all official agencies that UVC stops 100,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Another massive, glaring, lethal lie from academia, betraying populations around the globe because their paychecks and pensions depend on them doing so. So we're getting massive amounts of UVC in the surface now, in addition to exponentially high amounts of UVB. And it is scorching everything here, Sean, from the leaves on the trees that are defoliating because of this. It's killing plankton. It's burning the bark off of trees. This is here now. It's not on the horizon.
I want to mention, too, that you were kind enough to send me a packet of materials that I could hand out in my neighborhood, and I'm happy to report that I put out the flyers, Geoengineering is Threatening All Life on Earth, but you also have this beautiful pamphlet, and you sent me about a dozen of these, Geoengineering, A Chronicle of Indictment, Exposing the Global Climate Engineering Cover-Up, Fact and Photo Summary by Dane Wigington. This is an extraordinary pamphlet, and I sure hope people will go to your website and order them, and they ought to pay for them. I don't want to leave you with the bill on that, Dane. I know you're kind of self-funded, but here's the thing I want to ask you. I'm concerned about the Internet of Everything and 5G, the rollout of 5G. I'm concerned about all the stuff they're spraying in the skies, aluminum, barium. Do you think that there are multiple strategies to what they're doing with the skies? They tell us it's to curb global warming, when they admit to it at all. What is the strategy?
There are many, many agendas being carried out. In regard to your statement of what the official narrative is, that objective could not be further from reality. Although they can and are creating short-term, highly toxic engineered cooldowns, those cooldowns come at the cost of an even worsened overall warming. Those particles in the atmosphere that deflect some of the sun's incoming thermal radiation also trap radiation. That shouldn't be too hard to figure out, but academia, again, they're not involved with this for the common good. They're simply involved for their own reasons, as is the military-industrial complex. So in addition to weather warfare, which this has been the covert and most preferred tool of the power structure for decades, they can win a war against a country that never even knew they went to war, decimating them with quote-unquote natural disasters that are anything but. So in addition to weather warfare, in addition to trying to mask the severity of a disintegrating climate, much of it coming from climate engineering itself, not the only cause, but a primary causal factor, I would say mathematically, again, as a single causal factor, mathematically, climate engineering is the single greatest climate disrupting factor, but not the only factor. We have not been good stewards with the planet, Sean. I don't think any of us can argue that. In addition to that, we know these heavy metals are neurodegenerative causing agents. All of us are getting dumber by the day. That's not my speculation. Any one of your listeners can look that up. IQs are dropping precipitously. We're all inhaling these particles. We have internationally recognized neuroscientists like Dr. Russell Blaylock stating on the record his deep and dire concern about the process that's occurring in the population of inhaling these particles like aluminum, which is a primary element in climate engineering patents and showed up in all of our lab tests in unimaginable quantities, goes right through the olfactory nerve, enters the bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and starts to disable our neurological function. So that is absolutely a desired outcome by the power structure. I don't think we can argue that when we have David Rockefeller stating on the record 95% of the population needs to go. So all those people involved, Sean, in the chain of command on these programs, all the quote-unquote order followers who are trying to convince themselves they're doing something for the common good, all of these people are contributing to total planetary omnicide. So we need to wake them up to what they're engaged in before we have nothing left to salvage. And back to the two more points I'd like to make before I forget them. On the chemtrails term, the reason we're we so avoid that term is because, as you stated, there's no scientific basis for that term. And many, Sean, referred to the quote-unquote chemtrails manual. Have you ever seen that term referred to?
No.
From the Air Force? So that's what they refer to as proof that this term has some basis. That particular Air Force document called the chemtrails manual has nothing to do with atmospheric aerosol spraying. It has to do with lab testing and other geological issues. So the bottom line is, if we're playing chess, we need to play well. And if you're introducing this subject to others, you need to use the science terms so that the subject is not immediately marginalized. And that's where the chemtrails term leads to, conspiracy theory hoax. If we use the science term, climate engineering, geoengineering, solar radiation management, people will find hard science and they'll understand this issue is absolutely real. So we need to stick to those terms. And one more point, you mentioned the economy and things you normally deal with, economic issues. Mathematically, 75% of all GDP has been produced for free from nature, no longer. Everything from crops to fish farms are collapsing. We had 50,000 tons of fish just die in Vietnam. Approximately the same amount of salmon went belly up earlier this year in Chile. We're nearing the place where we won't have enough food to put on the shelves, and that's the bottom line. So with no biosphere production, there can be no economic production. There can be no civilization as we know it, and that's the road we're on.
You know, I love having conversations like these because it really sparks so many thoughts. So we're going to circle back to weather warfare. I also want to hit on eugenics, which I almost brought up. I felt like that would be a leading question, but you got us there with the Rockefeller agendas. So we can flesh that out too. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Big Agra, perhaps it was Monsanto, has come out now with new aluminum-resistant seeds. That ought to tell people everything they need to know. If these companies are worried about aluminum falling from the skies and landing in the soil, I mean, what else would explain them creating aluminum-resistant seeds?
Well, you're exactly right. Monsanto, as we know, to be one of the core detrimental corporations on the planet, they've created now genetically modified aluminum-resistant seeds, UV-resistant seeds for the same reasons I've already outlined, abiotic stress-resistant seeds. So they are capitalizing on the disasters that are unfolding. But I would point this out to your audience, an example I've used in the past that paints a clear picture. Although Monsanto would be comparable to a pirate on the deck of a sinking ship filling his pockets with loot, the ship's still sinking, they're on it, and they will go down with the ship. So we should not misunderstand that just because there's corporations making money off what's happening, it doesn't mean that the cataclysms that are unfolding are not real. And war is a good comparison for that, is it not, Sean? We have how many individuals on all sides of the fence making money from war, but that doesn't mean the war didn't happen. That doesn't mean people didn't die. Right now, our biosphere is collapsing by the day. Mathematically speaking, we are all on a very, very short time horizon. This is an extremely non-linear equation. Your listeners should understand and contemplate that. It could not be more non-linear. So you can't look backward at a chart and say it took us this long to get to this point, it'll take that long to get to that point. The rate of disintegration is accelerating so exponentially that on the current trajectory, our reality cannot be maintained much longer. That's a simple fact. The power structure becomes very desperate as they know they can't hide the severity of what's unfolding much longer, i.e. now the push toward global conflict.
Okay, and the other thing I just want to mention too, as it relates to all this, is sometimes we talk about the beast system and the New World Order and their plans. It's a very anti-human agenda, Dane, and when we talk about the geoengineering, spraying the skies with aluminum, creating seeds that are aluminum resistant, when we know that same company, Monsanto, when they invented GMOs, basically was asked by, or courted by one of these PR firms to visualize their future. And they basically stated that they wanted to own the world's food supply. What better way to own the world's food supply than to spray the skies with aluminum and kill all of the natural production food, making the world dependent on corporations? It's really a beastly scenario that we face, and I'm not sure how we stop it. I mean, do you know? How do we stop it? We can try to wake people up, but these Air Force pilots or whoever, where do these planes come from? I don't see how this is going to stop.
I would argue there's only one way to stop this, and that comes with a critical mass of awareness in the population, because we have a legal team, Sean, that is trying desperately to get FOIA's, Freedom of Information Act requests from agencies throughout our government, and being completely stonewalled from documents we are legally required to be given. So the whole system is blocking us in that manner because of the order followers. Again, and we all live with order followers, Sean. They live in our communities, our neighborhoods, they work for agencies, and and elected officials and so forth that are all towing the line, all just trying to remain a part of the herd and because they're afraid to do otherwise. But if we could raise enough awareness to wake enough of our military brothers and sisters up and others involved with these programs so that their families know what they're doing as well. And we are making progress in that regard because we have 2 retired U.S. Air Force Major Generals working with us, some other lower-ranking military officials working with us that did not know this was going on. They're fully committed to the cause now. Our legal team came about because of our efforts at geoengineeringwatch.org to raise awareness, and a number of attorneys realizing they're going down with the ship. Their retirement accounts, their jobs, their visions of what they thought the future would be are not going to be, and they understand that now. They know that if they want to do something for the greater good, it's now or never. And if we can reach a point of awareness where people understand they're literally, quite literally fighting for their life, then I would argue that's the only way forward. And reaching the U.S. military is essential because without having them on our side, we do have little to no chance. So it all comes back to critical mass awareness. And as we reach that, so many other people from so many other arenas, attorneys, physicians, people in agencies become willing to speak out because they know this is their only chance, that their silence will not save them. Hiding in your cabin on the Titanic while it's going down won't save you. If we could reach that point, we have a chance to create a paradigm shift. It doesn't mean our troubles are over. They're just beginning, because if we shut everything off right now, Sean, if we shut all anthropogenic activity off today, including climate engineering, the momentum behind the damage done is so immense that the cataclysms will continue to unfold. I mean, you can't just turn off the kind of biosphere implosion that's happened. But if we can salvage anything, Sean, I would argue that's absolutely worth fighting for, all of us.
Yeah, me too. You guys need to turn your attention, I mean, we all do, to trying to educate Trump. I think you know as well as I do that we're probably in better shape having Trump in the White House than Hillary Clinton, who really ought to be behind bars. But I'm reading this from The Guardian. Trump presidency opens door to planet-hacking geoengineer experiments. As geoengineer advocates enter Trump administration, plans advance to spray sun-reflecting chemicals into atmosphere. Harvard engineers who launched the world's biggest solar geoengineering research program may get a dangerous boost from Donald Trump, environmental organizations are warning. Now we've come full circle. Harvard's right back in the mix. But what is this all about? Because they've already been doing it, but now Trump's backing it?
Since Trump took office, the scale of climate engineering has been ramped up radically, especially over the polar regions. So although all previous administrations were a part of this, Obama, Clinton, Bush's, going back a very long way, obviously, to the mid-1940s, the Trump administration has, in fact, doubled down on geoengineering yet again. The pullout of the Paris Climate Conference, and the Paris Climate Conference, the Copenhagen Climate Conference, the Cancun Climate Conference, all of these assemblages of countries to try to come to certain agreements, it's all smoke and mirrors. It means nothing. So it's those who, the environmental community, who put all this weight on the Paris Climate Conference is simply delusion. There was never anything productive to come from that conference. Al Gore, his hypocrisy is immense. I don't think any of us could argue that. He owns stocks in the very companies he claims to be fighting. He flies around in his private jet. He consumes more power than anybody in his region. And the carbon credit trading shams, none of that is in any sense productive toward the whole. But what we see Trump doing is extremely alarming, and it is a ramp up of climate engineering. And this is something that must be considered in regard to Clinton. And I can barely stand to look at Clinton either, Sean. But why didn't Trump put her in jail? Why didn't he follow through with anything? And I would argue this, that any president, Trump, Obama, Clinton, Bush's, and all the rest, if any one that occupies the White House was truly a threat to those in power, they would be long gone, as Kennedy was a week after he drew a line in the sand with the power structure. So I would argue that Trump is playing exactly the part that they want him to play. And the mainstream media is so incredibly criminal right now, and their attacks on Trump with Russia and all this, of course, are completely unfounded and false. And they're simply trying to increase the divide and conquer. But I would argue that Trump is helping to create the division and confusion. Whether he realizes he's a part of that or not is irrelevant. He's helping to create the division and confusion that the power structure wants, so that the population as a whole does not see what's happening around them. The planet is dying by the day. Climate engineering is making it worse, not better. And this administration is doubling down on climate engineering, as previous administrations have also done. So I can see little difference here, or little hope, and certainly not in one individual that the power structure has allowed to live and allowed to be elected. I think we need to put our stock in ourselves. We're the ones we've been waiting for, not Trump, not Obama, not Clinton. It's up to us, Sean. And every one of your listeners can play a massive part in helping us reach critical mass if they would use the tools that are available instead of pointing at the sky and ranting. Use credible information to pass on, and that credibility is key. And they can all help us reach that critical mass of awareness very quickly if we all work together.
Okay. All right. Last question for you, and by no means do we need to let you go if there's other topics you'd like to discuss. But my last question for you is a little woo-woo in nature, but it's based on something that has been observed just recently. And it's, for lack of a better word, I would describe a radar signature or HARP signature that has been captured, reportedly emanating from Antarctica. And the leap that's being made is the result was that water receded from South America.
So we have two abnormal events going on here. One, water receding, the other, water rising. And what caused it? What caused it?
Were you following that at all? Have you heard about that?
I have. I'm familiar with the scenario that you outlined. It's South America, and I'm communicating with allies in South America right now. Those reports were real. It did happen. And in regard to radio frequencies, if your listeners searched radio frequencies effect on water, they can see various videos that would absolutely shock them as to the effect radio frequencies have on water molecular structures. You have to see it.
I've seen those. So I'll roll some of the video here. It's unbelievable what harmonics. I think that there's cures for cancer, Rife-style cures for cancer that are being covered up and have been because of the radio frequencies that can be used to help humanity.
Not only chemicals and physical energies like EMFs and sound vibrations, but even our emotions, thoughts, beliefs, and the way we develop our intentions and life rhythms can deeply transform our gene expression patterning at the cellular level.
Yeah, the video you're describing is very powerful.
It is, and I think the field that we're discussing that you mentioned is every bit as miraculous as you outlined. What we need to consider is we have former government employees like Ken Caldera. He's the equivalent to David Keith, only Caldera is from Stanford University. And I have an audio. In fact, your listeners can search Ken Caldera, geoengineeringwatch.org, and they can listen to this former government scientist who worked at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, now works at Stanford, second most recognized geoengineer on the planet, stating, they can hear him stating on the record, what he did for the government was this: to try and find ways to create natural disasters like tsunamis, sound familiar with the water that we just mentioned receding, and earthquakes.
Yeah.
And he went on to say that one of his assigned tasks was to try to find ways to seed clouds with pathogens to infect the population below. That's what our government does. You can hear it in his own words. So for anyone who is going about their life as if nothing is wrong right now, or as if things are going to magically keep going on as they are, time to wake up. We are all about to hit the wall at full velocity, and we need to focus on the biggest gaping hole in the bottom of the boat. Regardless of economic conditions, regardless of anything else, if the planet doesn't support life, that's it, game over. And as it nears that point, the power structure becomes unimaginably dangerous, because as the population wakes up and begins to panic, the power structure will play very big cards, false flags, global conflict. They become unimaginably dangerous at that point. So it's up to us to expose an issue like climate engineering, because all of us have been irreparably poisoned, irreparably damaged. The planet's been irreparably damaged. If we could expose this to populations around the globe, Sean, and galvanize them in a common cause, knowing what their governments have done to them, I would argue that's the single greatest leap we could take in the right direction. And all of us could help make that happen if we work together. And on the materials, again, we try to pass those on for what it cost us to produce them, ship them, pack them. We print in massive quantities, so like the booklets that you have that would cost a substantial amount of money, we can pass on very inexpensively just to try to get them in the field, and that's our only goal. So all those materials are available at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, and we hope everybody will pass on one way or the other credible data. They can download those materials for free and print them themselves if they want to. We provide those links. But if we all pass on credible data effectively and efficiently, we could have this insanity that's happening in our skies to light very quickly. And I would ask, and I'll end with this, how long can any of us hold our breath? Every breath we take is laden with these materials that are toxifying our system, shutting down our neurological function. How long can that go on?
Geoengineeringwatch.org, that's the place to go, guys. And thank you so much for checking it out and getting the word out. Dane, thank you so much for your time. You're always a real gentleman.
And Sean, to you also, no matter how much research we do, no matter how much data we uncover, without voices of those like yours, which carries a lot of weight and a lot of following, we would not be able to get the word out. So the same gratitude back to you, my friend.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And guys, it means a lot to me too that you guys, support us at sgtreport.com and come there daily for real news 24/7. The site is now mobile friendly, and it really does look good now. For the first time in our history, it looks good on your phone. So spread the word on that. And thanks for checking us out at thelibertymill.com too, where you can find daily news from all of our top trusted sources in the alt media. Guys, thanks so much for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.
These are smart, dedicated, loyal Americans. Your audience needs to understand that. The problem is there's not those people that are in there. They never get a voice. They are locked away and in there. The problem is the politics of power and wealth that is running this country.